Welcome to the Daily Insider here on Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers as we get set for a big night as baseball with the night off. Astros and Braves all tied up at 1, heading back to Atlanta for Game 3 of the World Series on Friday. But a couple of college football games tonight, as well as the NFL week number 8 starting up, the NFC showdown between the Packers and Cardinals. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Also hit on some NBA and NHL as well. And we'll be speaking with Vince Akins, who joins us every Thursday to talk trends. And that is coming up in just a few minutes. So before we get to Vince, I want to tell you about our friends at BetMGM. And BetMGM, you know who they are. They're the king of sportsbooks. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Now that's for new players only. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. You bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. Again, new players only, must be 21 years or older, and eligible in the following betting states: Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. only. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. All right, let's now look ahead to some of the football for the weekend. And as we do every Thursday, we bring on our friend Vince Akins to talk about the games and to break it all down. And Vince, we appreciate you coming on once again. And let's get right to it. How about it? Green Bay and Arizona tonight, NFC showdown. And of course, the Packers dealing with the injuries, or at least a COVID situation at wide receiver, with Devontae Adams out and Lazard is out. So Aaron Rodgers will see what he could do against this undefeated Arizona team.
Absolutely. Yeah. So a few unique things about this game. First, obviously, what stands out, I think, is the line with Green Bay getting nearly a touchdown here. So I went back to 2019, looking at games where Green Bay plays an underdog. If you go back too far with the Packers there, I think it's important to sort out games where Aaron Rodgers didn't play. But look at just those last 3 years. Green Bay is an underdog, 6-3 against the spread, playing as an underdog, going back 2019. But maybe even more noteworthy, 6-3 straight up in those games as well. So when they have covered 6 of those 9 games, they have won each of those outright. Obviously, earlier this year, they were in primetime game in San Francisco. It was a small road underdog and pulled out that last-second victory. So now switching just a couple of team trends here. We have Green Bay, who gave up 195 rushing yards last week to the football team. And that was in the victory at home last week. So Green Bay, an impressive 10-0 against the spread since December 2018, when they allowed at least 150 rushing yards last game. So Green Bay's run defense from time to time tends to have a struggle in a game, but they do a nice job bouncing back in these next games and have covered the spread in each of the last 10. Looking at the other side of the ball here, Arizona coming off that 31-5 victory. That's a weird score to say last week against Houston. So that was at home as well, and they obviously covered in that game, the 26-point win. This trend goes back to 1995. They were 0-12-1 against the spread as a home favorite, coming off a home game where they covered. But a little more noteworthy, that dates back to 1995. But just since 2015, Arizona 0-6 against the spread in this situation, and also 0-6 straight up in games as a home favorite, coming off a home game where they covered. That goes back to 2015. So not just failing cover in those games, but haven't won any of them outright. And there was, I believe, 3 situations just last year where that was active, and Arizona failed to win any of the 3.
And what's interesting, too, about that, Vince, is that Cliff Kingsbury had been a really good road underdog coming into this year. And he's got a couple road underdog wins right against the Titans, and against the Rams. As a favorite, he had struggled, but so far this year, he's been pretty good as a favorite. When you look at, the Vikings game, they didn't cover, but San Francisco, they covered. You mentioned Houston last week, laying 20 in the old scoregami 31-5 victory for Arizona. But this is an interesting spot just because Kingsbury has not been great as a favorite. And then you look at the other side and you say, again, almost touchdown Aaron Rodgers. How do you pass on it? But again, without the receivers, we'll see how much that affects him.
Yeah, I have seen. I don't have it offhand here. I apologize. That Green Bay has played pretty well in games where Devontae Adams has been out. He has missed a handful of games from time to time here. So obviously, I think that's the main concern there more than Alan Lazard, that you're missing Devontae Adams in this game. But particularly in big games, Aaron Rodgers, I would expect Green Bay to have something schemed up to try to negate that loss of Adams here.
Let's now look, Vince, at the college football Saturday, and then we'll get to the couple games in the NFL on Sunday. Michigan 7-0. Michigan State is 7-0. Last year, Michigan was almost a 4-touchdown favorite, and they lost to Michigan State outright. And now these teams, you look how competitive they are, and obviously a big game there between those two in East Lansing coming up on Saturday at noon on Fox. And Michigan right now at BetMGM, 4.5-point favorite over Michigan State.
Yes, and you mentioned that. I'll say to start with, there are some a pretty good system out there, and I don't have the exact results pulled up. 4 teams that lost as more than a 3-touchdown favorite against the same team the last season. They tend to not overlook the games the next year. However, not many of those games have a spread this close necessarily the next year. Usually, you see a team, 3, 4, 5 touchdown favorite, even if they lose against this team last year. Most of the time in the next season, they're still laying a significant number of points. This is obviously a much smaller line. So the first thing I pulled up here, and this is actually something that the system is not that interesting, but we have this matchup of top 10 teams and a home dog, Michigan, with their lofty ranking. Since 2015, home dogs are 11-11 against the spread when ranked in the top 10. And I pulled that up. You can go back even farther with that, and the numbers really aren't that interesting. So I mentioned that only because you possibly will see some analysis this week. Home dog, highly ranked team. That might be something people say to play on. It might be something people say to play against. And I only point that out that results-wise, it's really been right down the middle, and you might want to look at some other factors in this game. One, and this is a smaller team trend I'll note here for Michigan State, obviously getting the 4.5 points at home. Just since 2017, they're 0-5 against the spread when a home dog of less than 9 points. So we're looking at kind of small single-digit home dogs. And they failed to cover in those games by an average of 13.9 points per game. So when they've been a small home dog in recent seasons, it's resulted in some big home losses for the Spartans.
And we'll see if Michigan gets that revenge this week. And for Jim Harbaugh, we know Jim Harbaugh every week or every year it feels like he's always in the hot seat. It's just beat Ohio State at the end of the year, and then he'll get off it. But he's had that problem. But he's got to take care of Michigan State first. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. Now you have Vince coming up on Saturday afternoon, 3:30 in Jacksonville, Georgia and Florida. And Florida beat Georgia last year, and we know the rivalry between these two teams. Bulldogs, though, they've been a runaway train. They're laying 14 here against the Gators.
Yeah, and you mentioned that upset last year. That's going to come up in a minute here in one of these team trends I mentioned. But first, I just want to note the unique situation in this game. Looking back all the way to 1980, Georgia's only been favored by more than 7 points twice in this matchup. Obviously, that occurs every year. Most recently, though, that was in 2017 when Georgia won 42-7 as a very similar 14-point favorite in this game. That's the only time since 1980 they've been more than 11-point favorites against the Gators. So I have a couple of competing team trends here looking each way. First, Georgia, obviously 2 weeks ago, did not cover against Kentucky in kind of a controversial against the spread finish there, though the game had long been decided with Kentucky going for that backdoor against the spread cover in the final seconds of the game. But looking at Georgia since October 2018, coming off a win where they scored more than 14 points, but they did not cover the game. They are 9-0 against the spread. So on the other side of the equation here, a couple of very simple and smaller team trends for Florida that are active in this game. To start with, Florida 6-0 against the spread since 2019, coming off a loss in the non-bowl games we're looking here. That's already 2-0 against the spread this year. They picked up victories over Tennessee and Vanderbilt, covering the week off their losses so far. Also, Florida 5-0 against the spread in 9 non-bowl games, facing a top 5 ranked opponent. And I mentioned that because just last year, Georgia was ranked 5th in the country, coming into their big showdown. Obviously, Florida was ranked much higher last year, but still the underdog. And the Gators pulled off the outright upset in that game. So they have performed fairly well, 5-0 against the spread, including 2 upset wins since 2018 against those top 5 ranked opponents.
I know I'm totally putting you on the spot here, Vince, but how often do you see a team as a road favorite, a road double-digit favorite, and then the next game they come in as a double-digit underdog? That's the case with Florida here after the LSU game.
Yeah, I mean, it's rare to see it sort of at this major conference level. A lot of what I look at spans the full FBS and some FCS games, and that actually it does happen a lot more. Usually, you're seeing that earlier in the season too. Just because of the discrepancy of the opponents, that team's schedule from week to week. Particularly some of the mid-major schools are scheduling cupcakes one week and scheduling a team that they are due to get blown out against the next week. But yeah, I don't have an exact number for you offhand here, but this is a pretty rare situation, conference to conference game from one week to the other, to see such a big discrepancy in the line.
And also, too, you never see Florida as a double-digit favorite twice in the same season. It happened against Alabama at home and now against Georgia in basically 2 non-road games. It's just so rare to see with the Gators, and they covered the first time against Alabama. But we'll see what happens against Georgia. Let's go to the NFL now, Vince. Steelers, Browns in Cleveland, and Baker Mayfield, he missed the Broncos game with that shoulder injury. Case Keenum played well enough. He got him a win. The running game was very good considering Nick Chubb was out and Kareem Hunt was out. But now the Steelers, they're back off the bye, 3.5-point dogs at BetMGM. And look, Pittsburgh is not going to forget what happened in the wild card game against Cleveland, digging that big hole last year at home and losing to the Browns. So obviously big game for them, big game for the Browns to try to stay on track.
Yeah, being a local here, it does feel like the rivalry is coming back in this matchup a little bit. So looking at a couple of interesting team trends on the Steelers. To start with, Pittsburgh is 18-0-1 against the spread. This goes back to November 2008. Off the game as a home favorite. Obviously, they were off the bye, but previous to that, were home favorites in the Sunday night matchup against Seattle. When facing a team that has a better record than them, if they're not 7+ point underdogs. So we're talking a shorter line, facing a team ahead of them in the standings, which the Browns are by a half game here, and then coming off the game of the home favorite, 18-0-1 in that situation, dating back to 2008. And you talk about the Tomlin and Roethlisberger combination over that time frame. So this one has some validity going back to that farther date. Looking a little more recent, going back to December 2015, Steelers 8-0 against the spread as a road dog when they scored at least 20 points last game. So obviously 20 points in regulation and then the field goal in overtime 2 weeks ago against the Seahawks, and now getting points on the road, traveling to Cleveland this week.
Now, you're in Ohio. What's the latest? What have you heard with Baker Mayfield as far as him suiting up this week?
Yeah, it does seem like Baker might be trending towards playing this week. There's certainly been nothing definitive, but reading some of the local reports and local beat writers, it does seem like Baker's trending towards playing this week. So, in that case, I think this line right now is maybe sort of hedging that bet a little bit. Not that there's a wild discrepancy between Case Keenum and Baker Mayfield, but I could definitely see this line pushing upward if, say, Friday, Baker was ruled that he was going to start for Sunday's game. So something to keep in mind maybe before you jump on action, particularly if you like some of those Steelers team trends going into Sunday's game.
Now, the last game we'll look at, Vince, Buccaneers and Saints at the Superdome, and a lot of points here. Number one, New Orleans playing just their second home game of the season. They've been basically on the road the whole time with Hurricane Ida and the way that the schedule has worked out. The Green Bay game, they were in Jacksonville. They played a bunch of road games. They had the Giants game in between. They lost in overtime. So now they're back at home after the Monday night victory at Seattle. Tampa Bay has been great this year. They had the one slip up against the Rams, but also this is a double revenge spot for the Buccaneers. The one team they couldn't figure out last year was the Saints, who beat them twice. They beat them on opening day. They destroyed them in Tampa that Sunday night. So the Buccaneers here are 5.5-point favorite over New Orleans in the Jameis Winston revenge game too.
Yeah, I will say it's the the Saints have been a hard team to get a read on as far as the eye test goes this year. I would say they're one of the more difficult teams in the league to really get a sense of where their level of play is. And, just as we're talking about the games in general, I do think this season there may be a bit of a lack of middle tier teams. There's a lot of top end teams. There's a lot of bottom end teams too this year. And the Saints are one of those teams that do fall towards that middle tier, but it's hard to get a read exactly where they should fall as far as team rankings goes. For this game, instead of looking against the spread, I'm going to pull up a couple of nice over-under trends. You look at that total 50.5 here. The Buccaneers obviously coming off a dominant really on both sides of the ball performance, but dominant defensive performance last week, facing the Bears, holding them to just 3 points. Going back to November 2008, Tampa Bay has gone over in 14 straight games as a favorite when they allowed less than 17 points last game. And that's particularly noteworthy because just last season, this trend was active 4 times, with all 4 of those games going over the total. Also for the Buccaneers, pretty good defensively, both sides of the ball last week, held Chicago to 168 passing yards. Tampa Bay 9-0-1 on the over-under the last couple of years, with less than 9 days rest, when they held their opponent to less than 200 passing yards last game. That just goes back to 2019 here. So obviously the Buccaneers generally last year strong pass defense. This year it's been a little more shaky on the pass defense. You can count on their run defense, but last week it was strong pass defense effort, even with the Bears playing from behind that entire game. So something to keep in mind looking at the total in this week's game.
All right, the Buccaneers and Saints. We'll see how that one turns out in New Orleans. Vince Akins, he is hitting 57% in the NFL this year on Vegas Insider. And, you could find his trends for gridiron angles every weekend on Vegas Insider as well. You can find him on Twitter at SBBreakers. Also, Vince Akins joining us here every Thursday on the Daily Insider. Vince, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, and good luck this weekend.
All right, there is Vince Akins, and very happy to have him on because he brings us definitely a lot of good information and, some good trends for this weekend. That Bucs-Saints game, very interesting from the standpoint of Tom Brady wasn't great against New Orleans last year. Granted, you don't have Drew Brees on the other side anymore. You have Jameis Winston. And as long as Winston doesn't make mistakes, he'll keep the Saints in these games. Alvin Kamara had a very good game on Monday night out of the backfield as far as catching passes from Winston. But, New Orleans now goes from a road favorite in Seattle, short week, back home, only their second home game of the season. And we'll see if the Saints can hang with the Buccaneers coming up on Sunday. I want to say about the DraftKings Championship Series and the Sportsbook National Championship. That is coming up not too far away. Friday, November 5th, which is actually next Friday. And it goes on from the 5th to the 7th. And the tournament will be held in Weehawken, New Jersey. It's outside of New York City, and it's at the Enview Hotel. $1 million top prize for this Sportsbook National Championship. There's a $10,000 buy-in for the tournament, and players receive a $5,000 bankroll for the weekend to use to place bets throughout the tournament by entering a $5,000 pool. You can bet on NBA, NFL, and college football. Everything is pre-match only, no live betting. And the prize is $1 million. So you want to be the GOAT? You can be the GOAT if you win. The winner of the tournament will be given a free ticket to the Championship Series Tournament of Champions event in January. And then you can get more money and be crowned as the GOAT, just like our friend right there on the screen. You can be the GOAT. The DraftKings Championship Series coming up next Friday, November 5th through Sunday, November 7th in Weehawken, New Jersey. It is the Sportsbook National Championship. All right, so our thanks to Vince Akins for joining us. And the NBA coming up tonight. You have a handful of games. It's a Thursday, so it's not really a busy night in the NBA. 6 games. And the few big games you have, Knicks-Bulls, a pretty good one in Chicago. Bulls laying 1.5. total of 216, and Chicago's 4-0. Zach LaVine's a little banged up, has a thumb injury. The Knicks are 3-1. First time they're an underdog this season, and they're coming off that blowout win over Philadelphia at home, in which they snapped a 15-game losing streak to the Knicks, or to the 76ers, excuse me. So the Knicks got their revenge on the 76ers, and now let's see what they can do against the Bulls. And Chicago, so far the competition, they've beaten Detroit twice, New Orleans, Toronto, not great. And we'll see them stepping up, in a sense, against this Knicks team. Again, playoff team from last year. The Hawks and the Wizards in D.C., both teams played last night. Atlanta, they did not cover, but they beat New Orleans. They came back and won that game over the Pelicans. Hawks now 3-1, Wizards 3-1. They won at Boston. Really good win for them. Bradley Beal struggled from the floor in that game. But the Hawks laying 3, total of 222.5. They had a couple of wild games in Atlanta to close out last year. Beal didn't play in those, but also Russell Westbrook played in those games, and he had some good ones, but he's now in L.A. And the Lakers blew that 26-point lead to the Thunder last night, in case you missed it. The 76ers host the Pistons. Philadelphia laying 10.5 in that one, total 212.5. The Jazz, 9.5-point favorites at Houston. Utah now 3-0. Houston at 1-3. Spurs and Mavs meet up in Dallas. Mavs a 7-point favorite, 220.5 on that total. San Antonio 1-3 so far. Started 1-0. They've lost 3 straight. Golden State still undefeated at 4-0. They face Memphis. Grizzlies off a blowout loss at Portland last night. The Grizz at 2-2. Remember, Memphis knocked Golden State out of the playoffs last year, so rather play-in tournament, I should say. And Golden State laying 6 in that game. And in hockey tonight, Penguins back at home hosting the Flames. Calgary continuing their road trip. Calgary's 4-1-1. They've caught fire of late. It's in their name. Bruins trying to hand Carolina their first loss. Hurricanes at 5-0-0. They're laying 135 to the Bruins in Raleigh. Arizona has not won a game yet. They're 0-5-0 at Tampa. Lightning laying over $3. This is interesting. Avalanche laying 125 at St. Louis, and the Blues are 5-0-0. Maybe the Avalanche worth a look there. Sabres and Ducks. You have 5 games starting past 10 o'clock Eastern tonight. So you got a lot of late degenerate specials. Sabres and Ducks in Anaheim. Ducks laying 135. Wild and the Kraken in Seattle. Kraken coming off a win over Montreal. Minnesota 5-1-0 in the season. Minnesota a short favorite there. Philadelphia won at Edmonton last night. Flyers in Vancouver to take on the Canucks, who are laying 135. Montreal's at San Jose. Canadians at 1-6-0. Sharks back at home. Maybe it's a spot to fade them and laying 125, 130. Winnipeg's at L.A. The Jets continuing their California trip after beating the Ducks a few nights ago. Jets are favored, or the Jets have now dropped to an underdog. Kings laying 115 against the Jets. And in college football tonight, the 2 matchups, it's not a great card, admittedly, but there are games there you can bet on. They're on TV. Troy and Coastal Carolina. Coastal lost their first game last week, and they are laying 17 to Troy. USF and East Carolina out of the American, and ECU laying 10. South Florida coming off of their 2 most competitive games of the season. I mean, they lost to Tulsa by 1, and then they beat up Temple. They dominated Temple last week at home. That's their first win over an FBS school this year, and now USF is getting 10 against East Carolina. And the Pirates they have covered a lot as a dog. You don't see them in this kind of favorite role. East Carolina won at USF last year. East Carolina came back to beat Marshall earlier this season in a non-conference game. Also, they lost to Houston in overtime last week. They lost a close one to UCF. So they've been competitive. They lost to South Carolina, who we see is not really that good of a team. They've had quarterback issues. But ECU at 3-4, a little misleading. They lost to App State too. Like they've lost a good competition so far. And USF, I mean, they've lost to good teams too. But East Carolina could be worth a look there, even though they're laying 10. 1 more win than USF on the season. And then tomorrow, Navy and Tulsa in the American, UNLV and Nevada out in the Mountain West. So these weeknight games in college football, not great, to say the least. But ESPN, ESPN2, they have them, so bet on them. And we got Cardinals and the the Packers tonight in Arizona. And J.J. Watt's out for Arizona. Devontae Adams out for the Packers. Lazard out for the Packers. There's a lot missing in that game. That total dropped to 50.5. And I do like the over in spite of these guys being out. You have 5 straight unders on Thursday night that we've seen. So wondering if that one turns around pretty soon. And again, you have Aaron Rodgers, who may not have the weapons to throw to, but Arizona's last 3 opponents, Houston with Davis Mills, Cleveland with a beat-up Baker Mayfield, San Francisco with Trey Lance making his first start. Now you're facing Aaron Rodgers. So obviously, Arizona's defense stepping up in class a little bit here against Green Bay, in spite of one of the best receivers in football not playing in this game. And baseball, like I mentioned before, 1-1 between Astros and Braves. So they go back to Atlanta. Game 3 coming up on Friday night at Truist Park. Ian Anderson, Luis Garcia on the mound. And that game, basically, the Braves a short favorite there. But it could close as a pick 'em. We'll see how that one goes. BetMGM, they are the king of sports books. And if you're a new player and you're over 21, you have an opportunity at this promo here. Bet $10 to win $200 if your team scores a touchdown. Bet on any NFL money line, and if your team scores a touchdown, you'll receive an additional $200 in free bets. New players only, must be 21 years or older. Eligible in Arizona, New Jersey, Indiana, Colorado, Tennessee, West Virginia, Iowa, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C. only. Full terms and conditions apply. That is BetMGM. They are the king of sports books. My thanks to Vince Akins for joining us, as he does every Thursday, to break down the trends. And we'll talk NFL and college coming up on Friday to wrap up the week. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for tuning in to this edition of the Daily Insider. If you missed any of it, check it out on our YouTube channel. If you want to check out my conversation with Vince, it is there. And it'll also be on our homepage all day long as well. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching. And as always, best of luck with your bets.